Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon, or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode.
You know, usually October is my time of year. I love the foliage. I love the scary stuff. I love Halloween. But this month and the week leading up to it has been a real stinkeroo for me personally. I got to tell you, started off, I lost my job again, though I am optimistic I'll get a new one. And it's too bad because it was a great job and it was really good people that I enjoyed. So, but on to the next thing. Also, my father had to move him into assisted living. Most of that was done by my sister, Cheryl Hackinson. I helped where I could, but that's always a tough thing, from going to independent, having to be in the hospital, and going to assisted living. And then, as you may hear, I'm fighting the last vestiges of COVID. A minor bout I had late in the month, the last week, actually. So it's been a rough month, but there have been some great things that have happened as well. I met old pal Rob Guttrow, the pet psychic, at a Paracon earlier this month, and Rob was very thoughtful. He gave me a surprise gift after the fact that he sent to me. I really want to thank him for all that he does, and make sure you check him out and buy his latest books. He has Pets in the Afterlife 4, I think, about cats, so pick that up. I want to also thank Dan Miller and John Hillring, 2 of my fraternity brothers. I went to IU homecoming. I was healthy there. Got to meet a lot of people and reconnect, and it was great seeing Dan and John and spending some time with them. We even did a ghost walk with pal Joni Mahan in New Harmony. We got to meet Joni, who was also on one of my prior episodes, and she did a really great ghost walk. It was fantastic, and I recommend that you do it next year. And Ruthie Larkin, the Beantown Medium, is always supportive of me, and she's been super helpful this past month with sending me the angels and good spirits to get me on the right track. And I also want to throw one last shout out to brother Rob Scott. Rob apparently listens to the show quite a bit, and so Rob, if you're out and about, listen to it. Thank you. It was awesome meeting you. Great guy, just as you were back in college, and hope you enjoyed this episode. And I hope everyone listening enjoys this episode, and you have a wonderful Halloween, and we have some other episodes lined up that are going to be really awesome in November, so we're going to end the year strong. Be well, folks.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
So, folks, this episode is a mashup. It's really part 2 of my celebration of my 100th episode. I call it the best of the Unrest because it's really some of the creepy and chilling episodes from episodes 51 to 100. pay attention, especially to the last one. That's one of the more unsettling things I've had happen with an EVP that bled through. So check the show notes. That'll tell you what these episodes are. And as always, enjoy and stay scared.
Tonight's guest talks to real-life people who think they're possessed. Based on his astute psychiatric evaluations, sometimes they are.
Your mother's in here with us. Would you like to leave a message? I see that she gets it.
Get ready to enter the dark side with Dr. Richard Gallagher as we talk about his book, Demonic Foes.
The evidence base for possessions, which we talked about, is actually throughout history and much more massive than people think historically. The evidence for possessions is historical. Now, history, is that a type of science? Well, it's not anti-scientific, but it's a different way of looking at the question. In my opinion, it's a type of knowledge, if you're really familiar with the data and the historical evidence. But it's not quite, you can't do experiments on evil spirits. They're spirits. So you're not going to be able to do experiments on non-material realities, which is what they are. So you're not going to be able to get x-rays. People say, well, how about at least audio tapes and videotape? Dr. Gallagher, you've reported some cases that have levitated. Why don't you have videotapes of that? It's a naive request by the skeptical people, because you're dealing not only with a non-material entity, you're dealing with an entity that has its own will and its own intelligence and its own strategy. In fact, I think that most evil spirits, just as most angels, I believe in angels too, these creatures are generally more intelligent than we are. And they have their own ways of operating. They're not just going to perform for a camera. They're very aware of what's going on, and they know whether they're being videotaped. So you asked me about another set of issues. Well, on a more personal level, how did I, agree to get involved in this? I was brought up Catholic. So I think from a young age, I did believe that probably, evil spirits existed based on the Gospels. And then the Gospels, which were read in church, of course, all the time, talked about cases of possession. Now, I was skeptical enough, and I went through a period where, like most young people, I questioned my faith. Is this really fullest revelation of God, so to speak? So I certainly went through periods where I said, well, maybe some of these cases of possessions were just mental illness. Maybe they were beliefs of the time that were mistaken. But especially as I was then asked to consult on some of these rare cases, I began to see that there was a true reality behind these cases, that these were true supernatural, or what we call preternatural, beyond nature phenomena, and that the best explanation was the traditional church's explanation, that some people get possessed or attacked in other ways.
Did you know Father Jack before he knocked on your door and asked you to become involved? Did he just appear, or?
I don't exactly know how he found me. I was, a young academic psychiatrist at the time. I guess I knew enough priests who knew that I went to Mass and that sort of thing. So I was a practicing Catholic, and because I had never met him before, somehow he decided he would ask me to help out. And I remember saying, well, Father, I'm a little skeptical about some of this stuff. And, I remember exactly what he said to me. He said, "You're skeptical. That's exactly the type of person we want."
Let's talk about Julia. She had seen 2 psychiatrists before you seeing her. Why did she need to see a 3rd psychiatrist, and how did that first meeting with her go?
As I recall a little more precisely, I'm not sure that this is clear in the book, she had seen 2 psychologists, and she had seen a priest psychiatrist. The 2 psychologists felt this was clearly beyond any kind of psychiatric problem. The other psychiatrist wanted to observe her in a hospital, and she said that, I'm not crazy. I'm not going into any darn hospital. I don't think she used the word darn. And the priest, who was this priest exorcist, prominent guy I call Father Jacques, He wanted to see me, not because he was unclear at that point. I mean, her symptoms, if you want to use that word, were so remarkable. He was sure that she was possessed.
And she was possessed, not oppressed. So she was one of the rare cases of her possession, correct?
Yeah, and this was an incredibly flamboyant case, which I can elaborate on if you want. But he wanted her to talk to me. And again, she's not my patient. And I told her, I said, look, Julia, not her real name. I said, if you need a psychiatrist, you need medications to relax you, you want to talk to a therapist, I'll help arrange that. But I'm not the person. I'm being a consultant for Father Jacques, and you can talk to me or not. And I said, what he really wants me to talk to you about is your whole ambivalence about getting help. She was ambivalent about getting help because she had a lot of psychic powers, which she didn't want to give up. And she got it, in her opinion, from Satan. The price was that she was possessed. She didn't want to be possessed. She wanted to have her cake and eat it too.
Yeah, she did some, not to tell too much, but she did some pretty horrible things regarding orgies and fetuses and things. But she didn't really want to have remorse for that. She just didn't want to be possessed for the most part. So her forgiveness wasn't probably the true forgiveness in a Catholic sense that you look for in cases like this, correct?
It's quite clear, unless she gave up her evil lifestyle and unless she stopped worshiping Satan, which she did, and unless she left the cult, she would never get better. And she wouldn't be able to utilize exorcisms, which were sort of being attempted willy-nilly. So if you think about it, Bob, this was an incredibly remarkable case. Here you had, number one, a rare Satanist. I'm not the type of person who says Satanists are hanging out at every corner neighborhood. Number two, she was willing to reveal the inner workings of the cult to me. And I came to know her and her history extremely well because the priest wanted me to talk to her about her ambivalence and lack of motivation, let's call it. And number three, it turned out to be what these two exorcists themselves, these incredibly experienced guys, said was the most flamboyant possession they had ever seen. Now, what did they mean by that? Again, and I have been to several hundred exorcisms in my life. This is over, remember, 25 years.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I could not go to hers. I had a family. I was a practicing psychiatrist. I was an academic psychiatrist, publishing things and stuff. So I really didn't have the time to go to her exorcisms. On the other hand, the people who attended the exorcism, including these two priests and about 7 other people, they all told me the most remarkable stories. They all witnessed her levitating. They all witnessed her speaking in the voice of the spirit, many different languages. She herself was remarkable that even outside of her trance possession states, she knew all kinds of things. She told me, for instance, how my mother had died, years earlier of ovarian cancer, but she did that with many, many people, about many, many people. She claimed that she could see people from a distance. Now, if you know anything about, the sort of pseudoscientific field, which is what I regarded as of parapsychology, they study these phenomena. They often, have no good explanation.
Actually, do you mind if I interject one thing? When we're talking the 1980s, so when she's sharing information, she's not going on Google and looking things up because didn't exist at that point. So she's finding stuff that she could certainly not find anywhere, correct?
On that, it's that she had knowledge that was obviously, the skeptical say, well, she was a good guesser. She did cold readings, this sort of.
Yeah.
And, I suppose there are some people who are very good at that. The kind of detail that she knew was so precise about so many people. I mean, unless she had a team of 10 private investigators, accompanying her. And she had no reason for doing that. And she said, look, I have this ability because Satan gave me this ability. But here's a good example of something that is even more remarkable, but in line with this knowing hidden things, hidden knowledge. She claimed to me that she could see people at a distance. So I remember saying to her one day after she said to me, well, I can see Father A from a distance right now. And Father A was about 100 miles away. I said, really? I said, you haven't talked to him? No, I haven't talked to him in weeks. I said, okay, Miss Smarty Pants, prove it to me. I said, I'm going to call him after you tell me what he's doing right now. She goes, well, he's walking along a beach. He's saying his prayers. I said, what is he wearing? He has a windbreaker on. What color? Blue. And I said, anything else? Yeah, he's wearing his khakis. So I said, okay, I'm going to call him. So I call him. I say, Father A, this is Rich Gallagher. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, who wants to know? I say, I want to know. I didn't want to tell him yet. So he goes, well, usually I would be saying my breviary, which are the prayers, at where I live, my residence. But I decided I'd take a little drive. I'd go to the shore. I'd walk along the beach. And I said, and what are you wearing? He said, well, I used to be in the military. I have my khaki pants. I said, what about a jacket and tie? He said, no, it's cool. So I have my windbreaker in. I said, what color? And then he said to me, I remember him saying to me, I know what's going on. He says, you're talking to Julia, right? I said, yeah. He said, yeah, she's something else, huh, Rich? Okay. There were scores of these things. I don't mean, this particular remote knowledge, but this hidden knowledge. She spoke languages during the exorcisms. She levitated. You believe it or not. I believe it because I some of it observed myself, and some of it, 8 or 9 people told me, salt of the earth people. Her story was completely credible. She was possessed because she was a worshiper of Satan. I don't think there's a lot of those people, but there are some of those people.
So she was never, we don't want to take everything from the book, but she was never quite cured despite all the exorcisms. Do you think the demon inside her was actually Satan, or was it another powerful demon? Did they ever get even close to identifying that?
They lie. So you never quite know until they're really forced eventually to acknowledge who they are. Yeah, so I don't know. I think the demon during the exorcisms talked about some name, and maybe there was more than one. A lot of this stuff is a little murky because you can't believe these demons. It never got to the point where we were confident that the demons were speaking truthfully because she refused to continue. Look, she was scared of the cult. She was afraid they were going to harm her. Number 2, she didn't want to give up her powers, which she would. She was right that she had these psychic abilities, that she would lose these abilities if she was delivered because she got them from the demonic world. I believe that she got it directly from Satan because she prayed to Satan. And number 3, she was sort of in love with the leader of the cult, who was a truly nefarious, evil man. And like these women who love criminals or something. Somehow she was entranced by this guy, and she knew that he would be extremely upset if she turned to the church, so to speak. So she called me one day, and we spoke, and she said, I can't continue. About 1.5 years later, she called me. She said, well, I changed my mind. I want the exorcism again. I said to her, this was on the phone, I said, well, look, Julia, first of all, you have to commit to it. And second of all, why do you want to do it now? She said, well, I'm dying of cancer. And I said, well, I need to speak to your oncologist. And she goes, yeah, I'll think about whether I want you to talk to him. What was her motive? I don't know. But then we never heard from her again. And we think she died. Because I think we definitely would have heard from her if she was still alive. Although it's possible. It's possible she's alive. I kind of hope that. But I don't know. Maybe her cancer was cured.
So the last story about Julia was actually the first one where you met her. I've heard it on a couple different podcasts. I just think, so I know it's been mentioned before about the cats. You mind just talking about that? And then I want to talk about a couple other cases.
Well, my wife and I'm in this house right now, and upstairs, right above me, is our bedroom. We were in our bedroom. We had 2 cats at the time. And about 3:00 in the morning, we were awakened by these two cats going at each other like prize fighters, really trying to destroy each other. And we'd never seen that before. And as a matter of fact, they're not alive now, but we never saw that again. And so my wife and I looked at each other. We had to separate them. Did they get a hold of catnip? Who knows? And, we went back to bed. Surprisingly to me, because this was something also that has never happened since and will not happen again, the priest brought this woman to meet me to my house. And the first thing that came out of her mouth when we got introduced was, "Oh, hi, Dr. Gallagher. Nice to meet you. By the way, how did you like those cats last night?"
Oh, boy. Oh.
I think I finally saw the light. With one look in your eyes tonight. She was sitting with me when it should have been you. Instead of knocking back this 100 proof, I need to sober up and stop acting like a fool. Thought I was doing just fine till you walked in my life. Looking for love but only for one night. Wasting all this time on what she put me through. So pour me one more round, time to slow things down. Got me spinning all around this town. And I know for sure before this night is through, I'm gonna be wasted on you.
All right, I am here with my sometimes co-host, good friend Kyle Carvin, and a great guest, Butch Gibson, who is in the band 3 and 20. Now, some of our listeners may recall one of my earlier shows, probably the 5th episode, was with my banker. People tell me ghost stories. For example, I went out to the liquor store the other night, right before I was going to work out. I went to the liquor store, and the cashier saw my Afraid of Nothing sweatshirt, and she had a ghost story for me. And my banker, a while ago, and he said, "I got to tell you this crazy ghost story that happened to me when I was a teenager at a summer rental." And Kyle had met Butch a few years ago from an Airbnb rental. And one night, Butch shared a ghost story with Kyle. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, because it's a pretty crazy story. We're going to talk about that story and the aftermath, if anything new has happened with Butch. So with that, Kyle, why don't you give us a quick introduction to Butch?
Well, hello again to Bob. And hey, Butch, man, good to talk to you again. It's been a long time. I met Butch a few years back. It was either 2018 or 2019, and I had an Airbnb in Georgia, and it was like a Walking Dead themed Airbnb. And Butch and his wife, they came down. I believe it was like a birthday weekend. Big fans of Walking Dead. And the town where my Airbnb was actually where the show is filmed. So that's kind of how it all ties together. They came down to, experience Walking Dead. Most importantly, Butch and I, we hit it off pretty quickly. And after his wife went to bed for the night, me and Butch, I think we talked for about 4 or 5 hours that night. It was crazy, like into 2 or 3 in the morning or something like that. And Butch told me some cool experiences that he had, paranormal experiences. And ever since he told me a couple of years ago, like I've remembered certain details and always thought like I would love to hear those again.
We travel all over the country. I'm guessing this has probably been about 5 years ago now. We were playing a show at a wine vineyard in the state of Virginia. And of course, anybody who's been down in the South, that there's a lot, especially the Virginia area, Tennessee, North Carolina, there's a lot of antebellum land around there where there's still plantation homes and things like that. Well, the place that the venue owner booked us to stay for the evening was at a bed and breakfast. It was actually at a plantation home, a Civil War plantation home. So here we are. We're 5 guys, a couple of roadies that were with us, staying in this 3-story plantation mansion up in Virginia. And once we get done with the show, we get back, we grab some dinner. The owners of the bed and breakfast, they're already in bed. we're splitting off to our different rooms, and we start hearing sounds like a piano playing. And we knew there was a piano downstairs we had seen earlier in the day when we had checked in before we had our show. Well, a couple of the guys, we go downstairs, we're following the sound. We go downstairs, we see the piano, physically see the keys on the piano are playing. You know, it stops as we notice it, but we see it. One of the guys was across the way taking a shower in the bathroom. He comes out wrapped up in a towel. He's like, man, did you guys hear that? We're like, yeah, who was playing the piano? We're like, we don't know. We thought you were. That's why we came down here. And he wasn't. And so we saw that. And then go back upstairs to our room. We were hearing all kinds of crazy noises, sounded like children running around playing. It was really hard to go to sleep. It was keeping us up all night. Lights were flashing on and off. It was so weird. So we go downstairs for breakfast the next morning. We're all down there together. We're all kind of afraid to even mention it, thinking we're crazy, because we'd had a little bit of wine to drink. We'd been singing at a wine vineyard all night. So we go downstairs. We've been talking about it. The husband and wife that own the place, they come out and they see a look on our face, and right out of her mouth, the first thing she says before we start eating breakfast, she says, so I guess you met the children last night. And then the last thing, as we were loading up to leave town the later on that afternoon, we had all of our stuff in the van, and there was a huge chandelier that hung over the second floor bedroom window there, and it was out on the porch. And we were getting ready to leave, and me and three of the other guys in the band, we were all looking, and all of a sudden, we see the chandelier start swinging back and forth, and we pointed it out to the lady, and she's like, yeah, sometimes, she said, I guess they just jump up there and swing, they're telling you bye. So we were like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so the night that we met, you told me a story, and the details are a little bit fuzzy, but it's one of the more exciting stories that I've ever heard.
Yes, sir. It was the first home that I had purchased myself that I was living in before I got married to my wife. And it was a little old Mill Hill house that was built back in the early 1920s. And I'm living in this little tiny 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. And the first night that I realized something strange was going on, I had actually had one of our bandmates had came down from Tennessee, and he was playing the weekend with us. We had a show on a Friday and a Saturday, and he needed a place to crash. So I told him, no problem at all. You crash at my house. You can ride with me to the show. You're going to be fine. You can take the spare bedroom. So not thinking any big deal. Well, so I'm in there. I'm sleeping. I'm doing my thing. He's sleeping. We wake up the next morning. He's taking a shower. I'm watching some TV. He comes out of the shower, and just nonchalant as you possibly could be, in the middle of a conversation with me, says, hey, do you have a cat? You have a black cat? And I was like, no, I don't have a cat. I've got a dog. And I said, but I don't have a black cat. I have a huge Australian shepherd. He was like, okay, I was just wondering, because when I was in the room last night, I kept seeing a black cat running back and forth in bottom of the foot of the bed. And when I got up to look at it to see, what was going on, it ran like under the door or through the door or something. It was gone, and I never saw it again. And so I thought that was strange. And this is coming from a guy, the first time he's ever been in my house. We've never had any conversation whatsoever about anything like that, anything paranormal. Our whole relationship was just based off of him playing, a few fill-in shows for us. And that was it. So that right there was the first incident at that particular house that I started paying attention to. I guess you fast forward maybe a month or two after that, and he ends up calling me on the phone, and we talk, and he said, oh, I meant to tell you, I didn't want to scare you too bad, but in addition to the cat that I saw that night, he said, I'm telling you the truth, I saw a woman in the corner of your room. He said, I saw a woman in a long flowing white gown. And he said, I saw her for about 10, 15 seconds. Looked real as everything. He said she was kind of like floating in the corner, gone. And he said, the only thing I could think is maybe she's possibly your guardian angel or whatever. So at this point, I had not seen any of this stuff. And I'm just thinking, okay, this dude has seen all this stuff in my house. What's going on? So we have that phone conversation. I guess it's maybe a night or two later. I'm laying in bed. I am having the hardest time trying to sleep that night. I don't know why in particular, but I guess what I'm going to say next might be the reason why. But all of a sudden, I can't recall the exact time. It's around maybe 3:30 in the morning. I start hearing the loudest noise. It's almost like rock music playing at the top of just the highest pitch, guitar, screeching guitar, horns. I mean, anything you could think of, just loud, screeching, just crazy noise. And it's so loud, I literally had to put my hands over my ears, and I could feel a presence as I'm laying in the bed. I could feel the presence of something behind me. And so I'm turned over. I'm hearing this noise. I am freaking out. I'm starting to say every prayer I can think of. I know there's something behind me. I'm seeing like flashing lights, hearing all this noise, and just loud as everything. So I'm shouting out prayers. I'm just like, Lord Jesus, please, whatever's going on, if you can just make this stop. You know, I'm shouting out Bible verses, anything I can think of to make this stop. I don't know what it is, but I just don't want to turn over and look, because just something in me is telling me that whatever it is, I do not want to see. And I'm just laying there. I'm hearing all the noise. And then I'm praying. I'm just like, in the name of Jesus, please just let this stop. And then all of a sudden, everything quits. The lights stop flashing. The music's gone. I feel on my shoulder as I'm laying there, I know there's a presence behind me, and I feel something, plain as day, reach over, grab my shoulder. And I didn't want to, but I did anyway. I rolled over, and when I turned over, I saw that same lady in the corner, the floating in the corner. That Fiddler was the guy's name who had stayed with us. He plays the fiddle. That was his nickname. Mark Fiddler is what we called him. But that's what he had seen. And I saw that just for a split second, just right there in the corner. It freaked me out. Then it was gone. And I never had any other experience in that house for the whole next 2 years that I lived in it after that.
Forgive me, Father, for I have died. It has been, I don't know how long since my last confession, but after the accident, it's all just been, it's kind of in limbo. You know, I can't wrap my head around this aftermath. It just seems so unreal. And there are a lot of people like me here. It's kind of like a big lobby or a waiting room. No one seems to talk much. And then there are others, they try to help us move on, I guess. But I notice there's free will. Still, even in the afterlife. But the thing is, Father, what I've realized is sometimes we create our own hell. And I guess my point is that these others, they keep telling me that we should talk, you and I. And so, well, here I am. Oh, yeah, and I almost forgot. This isn't a dream. It's Kyle.
Tonight's guest is Father Nathan Castle, who claims he has helped at least 250 people who died suddenly or in a violent death adjust to the afterlife.
You know, I like I said, got your first book, been listening to it, and a couple podcasts. I heard somewhere along the line that every night before you go to bed, you say a prayer to free your consciousness to do good deeds. It's called a Compline for complete. I think you described it. Yeah. Because when you're sleeping, you figure you don't need your consciousness, right? So how do you make sure that your consciousness ends up with the right hands and isn't intercepted by any kind of not so nice entities? Is it the prayer that you say before bed that ensures that it goes into only positive divine beings?
Well, remember, I'm a Roman Catholic priest, and so I pray according to our customs and language and so on. Primarily, I make the sign of the cross over my body. I believe that secures the line. You know, I'm talking to you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and the body of Christ, and to no one else. Then I say, thank you for giving me a consciousness at all. Thank you for the events of the day. Winding down now and preparing to go unconscious. So would you hold on to my consciousness until the morning? And if there's anything that you can do with it in the meanwhile, please feel free.
And so one night about 23 years ago, something different happened than any time before you said that prayer. So you want to tell us about that night?
Yeah, I was on a retreat. I live in Arizona, and I did at that time also. In the north of the state, it's mountainous, and there's a lot of camps. When we would go on retreat with any kind of groups, it usually meant driving to the north to the piney part of the state. I was on a retreat with a bunch of other people, friends of mine. I was part of giving the retreat. And during the night, I was dreaming about playing golf, which is something I do. And I was playing with another priest friend in my dream. We finished our round of golf. We went into the bar. And in the bar, there was a silent auction going on. Have you been to one of those?
Yeah. Yep.
Walk around the room and you write down how much you'd pay for this or that thing. And then across the room, there was this nasty piece of framed art that was just horrible from a distance. And I said to my friend, who in the world would donate that to a charity? They ought to be ashamed. But it was so compelling. I walked toward it. And when I did, it moved toward me. And it was long before we had televisions on our walls, but it was sort of like that. It was a piece of framed art on the wall, but it moved toward me. And then inside the frame, there was a little movie running. You want to know what was in it?
Yeah. I'm just sorry. I'm just listening. Oh, my God.
I was looking at a guy sitting on the radiator of an old car from the late 50s or 60s, the kind with fins and lots of chrome. He wasn't in a wreck. He was more like a repair guy, grease monkey.
Yeah.
And he had his feet on the bumper, and he was sitting on the radiator with the hood open above him, and he burst into flames and was screaming, and he was angry at somebody outside the picture frame to the lower right where an artist's signature usually is.
Yeah.
I woke up from it going, wow, the first part was my dream, but the second part wasn't. I knew that was somebody else's content, and I sat up and I said a prayer, said, hello, my name is Nathan, whoever you are. I get it that you're calling out for help. I'll see what I can do in the morning. In the meanwhile, God bless you, and I'm going back to sleep.
Well, good for you to be able to go back to sleep. That's amazing.
Well, that's what I did. So I got together with a prayer partner who was on the street, and I knew that she was a spiritually gifted person because I had prayed with her for a number of years. I just said, I don't know what this is. Would you mind praying with me? And we got still and went into prayer. And she said, well, whoever it is really wants to talk to you really badly. Would it be okay if I let him? And she had the spiritual gifts to do that. And so I said, well, we've called on Michael the Archangel. We've asked for our own guardians. We asked for Holy Mary and St. Benedict. And anyway, a whole bunch of saints. Today's All Saints Day. So I create sort of a holy huddle and just say, no one outside the light is invited here, but we want to allow this man to talk. And he did. He explained who he was through my friend. And I asked him how we could help him.
Was your friend conscious? Did she know what was coming out of her at the time, but she was just kind of coming out of her?
Yeah, she was conscious. And I had witnessed her manifest that gift before. And I had that gift also. I hadn't manifested it very frequently, but once in a while, an occasion would come up when it just happened. And so I, went with it.
Was this instinctive? Did you know what to do after the dream? You said, I'm going to go back to sleep, and I'm going to make notes, I guess. And you called your friend. Did she tell you what to do? Did you know what to do instinctively? Did it just kind of evolve? Like when we're born, we're in the mother's channel and we're like fish. And then when we come out, we can breathe all of a sudden. Did you just know what to do all of a sudden?
Well, I don't know. You and I have not met except over, email and online. Yep. But you sound sort of commonsensical. Would you say that you're a practical guy?
Yes. I don't know if other people would always say that, but yes, I would.
And of course, you have this odd interest in all of this stuff, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a problem solver, that you just can't look at a thing and decide what to do next.
Yeah.
Like he was coming to me and to my partner asking for help. And I've done pastoral counseling my whole life. So when somebody new comes into your office, makes an appointment, as soon as you get comfortable, pretty much first thing you say is, how can I help you? What is it you want? And that's what we did.
And was it one session, or how many sessions did it take to help this person?
We took maybe 3. I'm not exactly sure. I tell this story over and over again. I think it was 3, 4 tops, about a week apart. We were both really busy people. And just the fact that you have some paranormal thing enter in doesn't mean everything in your life stops.
Yeah.
You still have to work and do whatever it is you do. We took it a step at a time. We reminded him that we would help him as best we could, but he was under no obligation to follow our advice. We just figured we'd get started and give it a shot.
You don't just get one stuck soul at a time. Do you mind telling us about the conductor from your book?
In the dream, I was in a car, stopped at a railroad crossing that didn't have a gate or a warning signal. Instead of a succession of boxcars, flat cars, tank cars, I watched a string of cars trying to cross train tracks, getting hit by a train. At first, they were from maybe like the 30s. Those big rounded cars that were, the style of the time in the 30s. And then as it kept moving, there was crash after crash after crash, but they got closer in time. And sometimes I could see people and other times not. There were 2 boys in one wreck. There was a little girl with a blue dress and white trim. And then there was a man named Briscoe who wanted first aid, and he was a Catholic and he wanted a blessing. Anyway, it went on, but I had the feeling when I woke up from it that this one must involve multiple people.
Was it a location, or was it just the type of accident? Was it like one bad road with a bad turn in the road, or was it just all these cars because, it's the type of way they died and they're stuck?
Yeah, I think it was more the type. And I've run across this since then with other kinds. Sometimes there are people that cluster according to the traumatic death that they endured. I don't know why, but they are. And in his case, he was the passenger in a car. He said he and his buddy had gone out just to have a good time, which meant drink.
Yeah.
I think the driver might have been drunk. But anyway, the train hit the car, and this guy wouldn't tell me who he was. He had a little bit of an attitude. We were with my older sister in her backyard in Houston, and she's also got the same gift. Both of my sisters do, of allowing speech. And this time he spoke through my sister. I just said, my name is Nathan. What shall we call you? And he just said, call me Buddy. But he did it with an attitude. He didn't. He didn't want to be friendly. He just was here to do this thing. And he said, these people, they want me to be the conductor, and I'm not the conductor. I never said I'm the conductor. And I said, well, okay, well, tell us, what happened and where you are. And he went on to explain that he was in this place where everybody was stuck, and there was a train track running through the middle of it, but there was a boulder on it, and they couldn't get out. So what would you do?
Well, you try to get your phone out and get some heavy equipment there to remove the boulder.
I just thought, well, that sounds like stuck all right, but there must be a way. And I believe the reason that you're here with me is because we're supposed to help you find a way. So let's get to work. What about like a fulcrum? Could you get something that you could, like some stick, you could get everybody there to, throw their weight against it? And he said it'd be easier if we just had some heavy equipment. I said, good idea. Have you asked for it? That'd be much better than my way. I said, have you asked for any? You said, no. I said, well, let's start there. Why don't we ask for heavy equipment? And I said, I'm a priest, and so I'm going to say a prayer because that's what I do. And so I said, would it be okay if I asked for heavy equipment? And he said, well, be sure to ask for the key to the ignition. Good idea. And oh, by the way, if I'm asking for the key to the ignition, maybe I could also ask for a heavy equipment operator just in case it's more difficult to operate than you know how to do. So he said, sure, that's okay. So I just said, God, you heard this whole thing. Could we please have a piece of heavy equipment? Could we have the key? And oh, by the way, could we have somebody that knows how to run it? And so within 10 seconds, he just said, oh, my God, look over there. And I said, well, I can't see whatever you're seeing. What is it? Well, he said, it's like a front end loader. And I said, well, is it yellow? Because a lot of times those big pieces of equipment are yellow. He said, yeah, it is. And there's a guy in it, and he's waving for me to come up in the cab with him. So I said, well, do you think you're being tricked? Does it feel unsafe? Do you think you're safe to do that? He said, no, yeah, it looks fine. I'm going to do it. So he got in, he climbed up in it, and he got at the controls of it. And then he said, and I can feel his presence with me right now, Bob.
Oh.
He said, oh, my God, look at that. And I said, remember, I can't see what you're seeing. And he said, well, it's like this great big bubble. And there's people inside of it. And one of them is my pawpaw. And I said, well, does he look scary? No, he just looks like my pawpaw. And I said, well, it sounds like he's come to help you. And he said, but they're telling me that I'm supposed to get anybody that wants to join hands, and we'll go together. So did you ever do that on the lawn? Like, did you ever Ring Around the Rosie or Red Rover or any kids game where you had to join hands?
Sure. I'm thinking like at weddings where it's the train and you're going around. Everybody's like,
And where you do the dance around the room. Yeah. Well, we anybody that wanted to, nobody was forced, but anybody that wanted to could join hands, and he would pull, and they would, or push through this thing, and they would all go together. That's the way it worked. At the end of it, before he left, I said, well, it looks, buddy, he had said, I would be the last person in the world that you think would be a conductor of anything. Oh. He didn't think highly of his gifts. He only died when he was about 20, and he hadn't been good at school.
Huh.
And I guess he had a kind of internal message that he wasn't much good at anything. And he didn't want to be the conductor. And I said, well, it looks like you pretty much need to say all aboard. That's pretty much what a conductor does, I think. You got to get all these people holding hands and lining up. And so he did that, and off they went.
I call Ari Aster in CS3, I call him this generation's version of Roman Polanski. And what I mean by that is the filmmaking side of it, because, I mean, he is just really this grand master when it comes to symbolism, foreshadowing. He loves it. He loves drawing on these very demonic themes. I can tell he's a big fan of The Exorcist, especially Hereditary, which is a movie about demonic possession. There's also all sorts of homages to The Exorcist in there.
I think when most people think about cinema symbolism, I mean, a lot of people think of Stanley Kubrick, right? That comes to mind as well. Like we both really are Ari Aster fans. I mean, like you mentioned, his two films, Hereditary and Midsommar, they both kind of center on mental illness, family tragedy, grief, and some type of pagan or satanic ritual thrown in. And they do a lot of foreshadowing, as you mentioned, and repetitive imagery.
Sure.
I'd love to start first with Hereditary and get kind of what you got out of that, and then we'll talk about Midsommar.
I love the two Ari Aster movies. Midsommar, the one thing that he loves to do is foreshadow. And of course, I mean, the one scene where she goes up into the attic there and you have the headless mannequins. I mean, if you watch the movie, you'll know that this demon, Payman, has this sort of fetish for decapitation.
Yeah.
But that comes from The Exorcist, believe it or not. When Chris McNeil goes up into her attic, you'll find some headless mannequins up there as well.
Oh.
And he is completely drawing from that movie. The Exorcist has one of the premier examples of foreshadowing in any movie that is out there. And it's the scene where Father Karras is sitting in the language lab listening to Reagan speak English backwards. And if you watch that scene carefully, the word I believe is Tuskegee. It's something to that effect, or Tuskegee, I think it might be. If you watch the scene, you'll see it's a Japanese word, and it's right above him in the window when he's doing this. When he's going over the voice recording with the expert, he says, "Oh, that's the language; it's English backwards." The word Tuskegee is Japanese for "help me." And the very next scene is when he goes over to the house at night, and of course he lifts up, Reagan's stomach, back the sheets, and on her stomach is the words "help." So it's one of the great examples of foreshadowing. And Aster must have loved this because all his movies are foreshadowing. He draws upon that. It's like an art of memory device. That little thing with the headless mannequin, that's a subconscious plant that's designed to draw you back to The Exorcist. Again, sort of the granddaddy of all the satanic, demonic movies. The one thing that I thought was very interesting was, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, knowing Aster the way I do, I think it probably was, is if you fast forward to Midsommar, which is a very demonic film, I mean, very, very grim film, the number 9 is one of the tropes that he uses. The number 9 repeats all over the place in Midsommar. And if you're familiar with Norse mythology, I talk about it in the book. I can't go over it all right now. But the number 9 is critical within Norse mythology. It's all over the place. What makes it so interesting, though, is in Ars Goetia, the Lesser Key of Solomon, this is the grimoire that contains the resurrection spells and incantations to raise Payman. And of course, this has the sigil of Payman in it. And of course, that's in the movie all over the place in Hereditary, the demonic sigil of Payman. It's the thing that's burnt on the wall, and Toni Collette has it on their necklace at one point in time at the beginning of the movie.
Wasn't it on the pole that she crashes into too?
And it's on the pole. It's on the pole that decapitates the little girl. That's the demonic sigil of Payman. What makes it so strange is Payman is actually the 9th demon in Ars Goetia, or the Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key. I can't help but wonder if he wasn't trying to somehow evoke this into Midsommar, because it's such a demonic, ghastly film that he wasn't trying to catch Payman's vibe and put it into the celluloid. It's one of those movies where Midsommar, it has that very satanic vibe to it, very dark. There's only a few other movies that have it. Midsommar is one, The Exorcist is another. The other one that comes to mind is The Black Cat with Karloff and Lugosi, which is an incredibly dark film. But I love works of Ari Aster. I mean, Midsommar, it's sort of like a dark retelling of The Wizard of Oz almost.
Really?
The reason why that movie is so complex, it's one of those movies that's quite like The Wizard of Oz. It's multi-layered. I mean, you have the symbolism with Midsommar, and then you have this sort of Wizard of Oz undercurrent with it, where clearly Danny is Dorothy and the 3 friends are the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. The boyfriend is a gutless coward. Yeah. The one guy is the heartless scholar, the Tin Man, and the other guy is the fool, the Scarecrow, who gets burned alive at the end. So it is this sort of dark retelling of the Wizard of Oz. I mean, it's the same thing, right? Dorothy goes up in the tornado to this magical land. Danny goes up in the air on the plane to this strange magical land, the Harger, or whatever it's called. So it is sort of this retelling of the Wizard of Oz. But then after that, when you get done with that, with Midsommar, then you got to go back and do it all over again, because you have to analyze the elder and younger Futhark, the runes. you have to pay attention to them in the movie because they're telling the story also. So I love those two movies. When I do Cinema Symbolism 4, I'm going to definitely include Hereditary in that one. But Midsommar is in CS3, and I'm just a huge fan of him. If you're into darker films and darker horror movies, by all means, check those out.
On Hereditary, like the color scheme was like a little darker and gray, but it's very bright and floral in Midsummer. But they're both dark drama masquerading as horror, kind of, because there's like a real. I mean, in both of them, there's like a death of someone, there's a family tragedy, and there's some grieving going on, and you got mental illness that's rampant with, I think, in both films, right?
It's certainly an undercurrent in Hereditary because, I mean, that's the whole thing is the Toni Collette character crazy, or is she seeing the stuff with the demonic possession, the demonism, the cult? And of course, this is treading on Rosemary's Baby. I mean, it was the same theme.
Yep.
I mean, is Mia Farrow, Rosemary, I mean, is she seeing things? Is she crazy, paranoid, or is this actually happening? And I always thought that Toni Collette did a great job. That scene in Hereditary when she's having tea with Ann Dowd's character, I mean, Toni Collette is like stone cold crazy. She's talking to her like she is a lunatic. And I thought that was really a really good thing. You know, what he's doing is, you know, is this woman nuts or is she really seeing this stuff? That's coming from the world of Rosemary's Baby, another very demonic film. You know, and it's the same theme. Was the Rosemary Woodhouse character, is she being paranoid, or is she actually seeing these witches' coven operating in the Bramford? I liked both his movies, and Midsommar was one that I took on in Cinema Symbolism 3, but I believe in the book it's one of the largest analysis that I did because it was just so much going on in that film.
My favorite line in Midsommar is, so are we just going to ignore the bear there? You know, at the beginning when they're walking by the cave.
Oh, sure.
That's like, I think at that point, I mean, I didn't pick up on it. I was like, that's brilliant kind of foreshadowing, right? It's the best way to kind of broach that subject, right? It's amazing.
Well, right. If you watch it, when you watch that scene, the camera keeps panning over that scene. I mean, of course, that scene with the bear comes with the mural.
That mural, that tapestry as a whole, like of foreshadowing of the whole story too, right? Is
right.
It? Yep. Okay.
Right. The tapestry is the whole thing with Maya and Christian. That's foreshadowing. But then you keep panning over, and then you have the bear, and you keep panning over, and the lottery machine is there, sitting right there on the ground that he draws the lot from at the end. So yeah, I mean, there's just a ton of foreshadowing in that film, and Astor uses it in both Midsommar and in Hereditary. The movies kind of like are almost interrelated. Almost the little girl Charlie, when she's up in the treehouse, has the box, the shoe box that's red. What is it? It's blue and yellow. Yeah. I mean, what's the clothing of the girl? I mean, that turns up later in Midsommar. It's the color of the girl who commits suicide with the pipe in her mouth. It's blue and yellow. Oh. So yeah, when you watch this stuff, these guys sometimes will pay homage to their own cinema, kind of creating this, universe that these movies exist in. Fred Decker did this in the 80s with two movies that he did, Monster Squad and Night of the Creeps. Those two movies actually, believe it or not, overlap very subtly. That's another thing these guys like to do, is create their own little universe in which these films exist. It's like a vacuum almost.
911 imaging in films like Vanilla Sky, The Matrix, and Fight Club. Can you talk about that? And wasn't there also something about the X-Files where there was an episode like 9 months before that almost mimicked or had kind of the same storyline about terrorists going into the towers?
I get asked this a lot, and it has become very, very apparent to me that I'm going to have to do a chapter on all the 9/11 stuff, and I'm going to do it in Cinema Symbolism 4 because there's just so much of it. And I am 100% convinced that this is coming out of the world of the supernatural. I'm not in the camp of that there are a bunch of Hollywood directors looking into a crystal ball, seeing this, and then deciding to plant it in their film or something like that. I believe that the imagery, it is clearly there, but I believe it is somehow emerging out of the world of the supernatural, which is, to me, makes it much more interesting. But really, when you look at 9/11, the lead up to that is just astounding how much 9/11 imagery turns up in film. And what makes it so startling is it's right before the incident. You can go back years for some of it, but that doesn't hold as much interest to me as to the 2, 3, 4 years leading up to it. I mean, The Matrix came out in 1999. I mean, Neo's passport expires, or was it 98, something like that. It expires on September 11th, 2001. The Patriot with Mel Gibson was in 2000. And of course, at the beginning, he weighs the chair. It weighs 9 pounds, 11 ounces, and he sits on it, and it comes crashing down. I've made up my mind. I'm going to do a whole chapter on 9/11 imagery in Cinema Symbolism 4. You're absolutely correct about the lone gunman. This was the X-Files spinoff that aired in, I believe, March of 2001. So we're talking, 6 months beforehand. And this involved a false flag government operation where airliners were flown into the World Trade Center. You have Fight Club is another one where the buildings come down at the end and Tyler Durden refers to the destruction site as ground zero. And then you have the Space Monkeys earlier on in the movie destroying the corporate art, which is the Sphere. This was a sculpture that was badly damaged in the World Trade Center attack. And of course, the Space Monkeys destroy it. I thought that was very fascinating. Of course, you have the Simpsons episode. And what makes it so peculiar is they line up.
Can you talk about the Simpsons episode? Because a lot of people may not be, or some of them may not be.
Yeah, it's called, I think it came out in, I can't remember what year it came out. I think it was 96. It's called Homer Simpson versus New York City. And it's the one where Bart waves the money in front of the little program that has 9/11 on it. It has the number 9 on it for $9. And then the 11 is made by the World Trade Center. What makes that episode so peculiar is it's like a timeline. Because I believe, and I have to go look this up in the book, the Simpson episode came out like on September 21st, 1996, and then September 21st, 1997, Fight Club was released. They almost all line up, like right on a timeline with 9/11. And it's fascinating. I mean, it's startling. And those are just a couple of examples with it. There are more.
It's interesting. You also said you feel it's supernatural, because I was thinking the same thing. It's like when someone takes a picture at a haunted house and then later on a ghost appears or something. Is this synchronicity, or why?
Right.
How does one kind of create the other, or how are they connected? And it's like, I agree with you. I don't think it's intentional that they're warning and they're throwing stuff out and seeing who's paying attention. It's almost like it's just connective, and it's just weird how, if you pay really close attention, how this stuff unfolds. Love ghost stories? We've got one to hit you right in the heartland of Savannah, Georgia. Home to rolling hills, historic plantations, southern hospitality, sweet tea, buried secrets, and restless spirits.
I had a crew member who was, when he showed up, he's like, I don't buy into it. He's like, I'm happy to work on your film. I don't buy into any of this silliness. I'm like, yeah, cool. I don't care. And my partner and I were off working on something, and he came to the house by himself, and he said that he felt very uncomfortable, right? And he gets to the front door, and he looks back into the room, and he says, hey guys, just want you to know, I mean you no harm. I'm here making a movie with Mark, I'm his friend, and I'm working with him, and nope, nothing bad. He walks out to his car and checks his phone, and he has a text message from himself that says, please come back inside.
October 1988. Bob Cranmer buys a house in the Pittsburgh suburb he grew up in. He has no idea that his dream home is about to become his worst nightmare. The Cranmers seemed fated to own the house at 3406 Brownsville Road. As a young boy, Bob had been drawn to the property, and just when the family decided to move back to Brentwood, it went up for sale. Without a second thought, they purchased the house that Bob had always dreamed of owning. But soon, the family began experiencing strange phenomena. Objects moving on their own, ghostly footsteps, unsettling moaning sounds that gradually increased in violence, escalating to physical assaults and, most disturbingly, bleeding walls. Bob, Lessa, and their 4 children were under attack from a malicious demon that was conjuring up terrifying manifestations to destroy their tight-knit household. They had 2 choices: leave or draw on their unwavering faith to exorcise the malicious fiend who haunted their home. Now, Bob Cranmer recounts the harrowing true story of the evil presence that tormented his family and the epic spiritual war he fought to save everything he held dear in his book, The Demon of Brownsville Road, a Pittsburgh family's battle with evil in their home.
Because we did our best to try to determine what had happened in the house, why the house was possessed. Not why it was haunted, why it was possessed.
Things seem to go very smoothly for you. Your first offer was accepted, and then your first time in the house, your oldest son, who would be affected, one of your 2 sons, I think, that was very much affected by the house, had an unsettling experience from the start?
My oldest son, who was 3 years old at the time, and he really can't remember this. He's like, my number one son now. I see him almost every day. He was separated from us during the showing of the house. The owners were taking my wife and I through, and we had our daughter, who was the oldest, and she was 4, and our son, the oldest boy, who was 3. We were in the basement looking at this gigantic furnace, akin to like a nuclear reactor. It was so big. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Where's Bobby?" And she said, "I don't know. Where's he at?" And we looked around and our daughter said, "He's upstairs." So my wife and the lady of the house is so big, it's not like you can just call upstairs. I mean, you have to go. So they went up the steps, the basement steps to the first floor to find him. And they went into the front of the house in the big foyer where there's a large staircase that goes up to a balcony on the second floor. And there's a landing halfway up the steps where the steps reverse back again to go up. He was standing on that landing halfway up the steps, quivering. And the woman kind of rushed ahead and embraced him and said, "Oh, come here, honey. Did you see something? What's wrong? Did you see something?" And my wife keyed in on that like right away and thought to herself, "Well, what do you mean? Did he see something?" Like, what kind of question is that? And he settled down and he didn't say a whole lot. He was very quiet at the time. But my wife kind of filed that away in her head, like, this is creepy. This is creepy. What's she talking about? Did you see something?
He was scared to sleep in his own bed, right, for a while, and he would sleep in the closet. I mean,
yeah. Well, he had one of the large bedrooms, and you can imagine these rooms are so big with 10-foot ceilings and big doors and big. I mean, the rooms are big. As Victorian houses are, you had 4 large bedrooms on the second floor. A fifth, what we used as a bedroom, really as a nursery, was originally designed to be a maid's room where they had a walk-in closet. They'd keep all the linen in this closet, and then there was a room for ironing and sewing and so on. It's big enough to be a bedroom with a single bed, but they're big rooms. There were 4 bedrooms. The back bedrooms all were connected by rooms. Back in the day, in the Victorian times, husbands and wives slept in separate bedrooms, and they would have a door between them. So that's what this house had. But he was in a front bedroom that was by itself, that later we would find out hadn't been used as a bedroom for years. It had issues. But it turned out to be his bedroom, and he would not sleep in the bed for at least a year.
Wow.
He slept in the closet with the light on, and we put a little crib mattress on the floor, and that's where he slept. He would not sleep in the bed. Now, we always thought, okay, there's a ghost here. Hopefully it's not mean or anything. Maybe we can just, there's lots of haunted houses you hear about.
Yeah.
And maybe we can just peacefully coexist. And as events and things happened, you'd come down in the morning and the lights would be on the first floor. I had a radio down in the basement in my workshop that was always on, and furniture would be moved around. And after you're kind of freaked out by that stuff once or twice, you just kind of put the stuff back where it's supposed to be, and you turn out the lights or turn off the radio and move on. But I did really feel that my faith could combat this if it was in fact evil. And I used to pray out loud, and I would have my children, we would sing gospel songs at night when I was putting them to bed. I thought, okay, we're a Christian family, we have faith, we're going to be okay. But to answer your question, I'd have to say my son was about 8 years old when he was the one who first saw a physical, at least to my knowledge, he was the one that saw a physical entity or a misty, smoky figure, a black figure passing in front of his doorway one day when he was home from school sick. And my wife went out to the pharmacy to get medicine, and he was in the house by himself. And he saw this black figure eventually come into his room. I figured, well, the Catholic Church kind of has a handle on this stuff. So I asked my mother to talk to one of the priests at her church to see if he could come and not do an exorcism, but do a ritual blessing of the house where prayers are said and they walk through the house with holy water and they bless all the rooms in the house. And it's a festive, kind of joyous thing. But I thought, okay, maybe that'll take care of it. So that was the first time a priest came to the house. Now, later on, when the proverbial stuff hit the fan, so to speak, around the year 2000, really in the late 90s, it's just that I really didn't realize how living with this evil entity was affecting my family and affecting me as well. But it was in the early 2000s, 2003, when it became very, very first person. I mean, you're talking about stuff flying through the air and smashing on the walls. And it was not hiding its or masking its presence in the house anymore.
Did the blood start appearing then?
No, that is something that took place. This battle began in late 2003 in December. And it lasted to the beginning through 2004, through 2005. And the final expulsion did not take place until about the beginning, maybe February, March of 2006. So you're talking over 2 years.
That's exhausting.
Yeah,
Jesus. My God.
About halfway through, in January of 2005.
Listen closely because you're going to hear some type of weird sound here. I'll amplify it and see if you can make it out. And this is on Bob's channel, by the way. And now I'm going to slow it down.
We were at our wits' end. I mean, it was just so bad. The kids were so bad. They were out of school, 2 of them. My daughter had moved out of the house. My wife was unhinged. I was unhinged. And we had been working with the church for a year, and things were getting worse. And at that point in time, I mean, literally, my wife and I were talking about getting a divorce at that point. I believe that the demon kind of declared victory at that point in time and began this process of covering the walls in the house with this blood-like substance that would be thrown onto the walls, not all at one time. It started on the 3rd floor, made its way down to the 2nd floor and to the 1st floor and eventually to the basement.
And here we go again.
And if you can imagine a priest walking through the house, sprinkling holy water on the walls and in the rooms, if you replace the holy water with a container of blood.
Do you think the entity was mocking Christ, the body of Christ?
Oh, there's no question. Everything they do is to mock church, mock things that are holy, even down to the scratches. When they scratch you, it's generally 3 scratch marks.
The Trinity, right?
And, they will mock and make fun of holy things. And this was a powerful, powerful demon. This was no,
Did you ever get a name? Did you ever get a name for the demon? Or
we did. Okay. At least the Paranormal Research Society, that went on to great fame with their own television show years later. After this was their first big case. And I really think with this case began the whole paranormal.
That wasn't Ghost Adventures, was it? Because I know I've had guests on my show.
No, it was Paranormal State.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, right. Yeah.
Brian Buell and Paranormal State.
Yeah.
From Penn State University. They were the first big program.
Michelle Belanger, or she was part of his team. I don't know if she went to your house, but she's kind of a psychic. She's been on this show before. I was just curious.
No, we dealt with several psychics. There was one who was associated with the Paranormal State group that initially going to come. She's from Gettysburg. I think her name was Julie, and she's pretty famous. And she was going to come with them. There was about 10 of them that came to begin with. And at the last minute, she said, "No, I'm not going to go near that house." And I suggest you don't go near it either. But she did, to her credit, gave them instructions as to what they needed to do when they came. And I can say that literally broke open the whole warfare that we were going through. It was a defining moment, and I have to attribute it to her insight as to what we needed to do. And we did. And two psychics played critical, and I've used the word psychic. The Catholic Church, at least Connie Valente, who worked with us, she was called a intuitive, a holy intuitive. Not to be, confused with some type of a witch type character. These people have gifts. They can see things. They understand things. It's not evil. They just can plug into the supernatural, and they can see things. My message has changed over the years from just telling stories about paranormal activity and demon hauntings and so on to what this book is really about. And that's the base fact that evil and good exist. Evil is just not, personality disorders of people or evil intentions of evil people. Evil, apart from the human race, demons, the devil, is real. So whether people like it or not, when you read the reviews of my book online, most people, 4 out of 5 people think it's a great book. But the people who don't like it really don't like it because it challenges what they don't believe. And they're forced to change, or at least considering changing that, and they're not happy with it. And they really hate me as the messenger. So my message about this book and why I felt so compelled to write it wasn't to just write some scary story about possession or haunting. It's to message, especially in these days where people pay little attention to God or the Bible or go to church or anything like that, especially young people. There is a creator. There is evil in the world, and we have a decision to make who we're going to follow. And that's the message of my book.
And right after Bob says that, this sound happens. And I'll tell you what I hear. It sounds like it says, "Hate God." What do you think?
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout-out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.